Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on asset management. My name is Adam Brome, and I'm an administrative coordinator with SARM. We'll start off today's webinar, as we always do, with a brief introduction to the webinar platform, which is Microsoft Teams. We will then transition into the main presentations. That will be followed by some time for Q&As. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available to view on our webinars page following today's session. Please let us know if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's webinar through the chat. The chat box is located on either the top or the bottom portion of your screen. Just click on the message bubble icon to view or participate in the chat. And this chat is visible by all webinar participants and presenters. The chat is also where you can submit any questions that you may have for the Q&A session following the webinar presentations. If we do run out of time before your question has been asked during the Q&A session, our presenters will follow up with you directly offline after the webinar. Presenters will also be asking attendees to participate in a few poll questions throughout the webinar. If the question is not visible on your screen when it is time to answer, simply open the chat, select your answer, and click Submit to provide your response to each question. Results will be shared with everyone in real time. And please let us know if you would like a copy of any of today's webinar presentations, and we'll be happy to send them to you directly after today's session. And again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's event, please let us know in the chat box, and we will do our best to assist you. And now, without further ado, I will hand it off to Dustin Resch, SARM's Manager of Programs, who will be moderating today's webinar.
Thanks, Adam. So yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be able to moderate this session on asset management. And we have a group of experts here with us, a diverse group of experts, in fact. We have Joanne Loy, Chief Administrative Officer from the RM of Manitou Lake, number 422. We have Nicole Allen, Executive Director of NAMS Canada. And we have Larry Sparks, Project Manager, Asset Management, Saskatchewan. And so I will pass it over to them, and I'll look forward to joining you again at the Q&A session.
Okay, I need to have there it is. Awesome. So hi, everyone. Joanne Loy, CAO for the RM of Manitou Lake, number 442. We're located in Marsden, Saskatchewan. My west boundary is the Alberta border, just to give you guys a little bit of context. Okay, now it's not advancing for me. Great. There we go. Okay, so a little bit about us. We were incorporated in 1910. We're 315 square miles, about 225 miles of undeveloped roads. 180 miles of road are high volume due to the heavy oil industry. So heavy oil, it cannot be pipelined. It is molasses in January. It has to be trucked. So most of our roads are gravel. We have about 15 miles that are a hot mix surface. And we do have about 320 miles that are undeveloped due to a large area of crown lease pasture and a large lake in the RM. So take note, our 2016 tax levy was 4.8 million. 2021, it dropped to 3.7 million. So our journey started back in 2012. We had taken the NAMS face-to-face training in Humboldt. We started with our heavy haul, high volume roads, and we finally completed our asset management plan in August 2016. Yes, we did hire a consultant. One of the reasons was new idea, new way of doing things, busy in the office, and great idea, but we kept setting it aside. But since then, I've completed the IPWA professional certificate. My former Reeve and my current foreman have both taken the NAMS training and the IPWA professional certificate. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of training. We ended up hiring a consultant through funding with MAMP, Municipal Asset Management Program with FCM. It was really to discuss risk and levels of service with council. Those are very key considerations and conversations that councils need to have. It helped council understand some of the trade-offs when making decisions. Often we forget about the life cycle costs. Yeah, it's great to pave a road. We don't have to gravel it. We don't have to grade it, but you still have to remember there's other things you need to do. Chip seals, seal coats, crack filling, line painting, a sanding truck to look after the ice and snow in the winter. Also recreation facilities. You have your annual maintenance and operations, but you have to remember you still have roof repairs, gym floor renewals. So what have we accomplished? We have determined our current replacement costs. We've developed a condition rating and what level of service is required. What is the cost of our desired level of service, which is a gas tax requirement. Our levels of service, what people want versus what we're able to afford or willing to provide. What the RM desires versus what the RM can afford. Risk management, what could happen if we don't, and we've put what needs work into an improvement plan. So when we started doing our asset management planning, the heavy oil industry was booming, the activity was high, our roads were used to transport oil. So our maintenance costs increased, but the life of our roads decreased. But we still had tax dollars coming in. So and what did we learn from all that? So our desired condition, if we had 201 miles of road that were at a lower condition. If we wanted to improve the condition, it would cost us $30 to $50 million. If we change the desired condition as to maybe not quite as high, 7 to 8 million. So it was about 33 miles of road. So you remember our tax levies? So looking at our asset management planning, we've realized we can't afford to do all the roads, the 201 miles road. We're going to concentrate on those 33 miles of road. And those prices were based on 2019 pricing. So this shows you that administration or that asset management planning is not just an administration exercise. It helps to show due diligence in your long-term planning, and it helps your serious discussions. But we haven't been without challenges along the way. A key one I hear is time, your asset management planning versus your regular activities. And it's still not fully part of our normal operations. That's why there's these webinars and training available. Administration, public works, and council need to understand the information that the asset management plan provides and how to use it. So council, they need good information about asset performance, risk, and cost to help set direction. They need solid information to make those sound decisions. They have to consider performance. What level of service does this asset provide? How long will it continue to perform at this current maintenance and operation levels? And risk. What's the likelihood of this road failing? And what's the consequence of it? Just because something is fully depreciated in your TCA register does not mean it needs to be replaced. And costs. What's the budget to maintain or change the current level of service? Are we happy with how the service is? So asset management gives us the evidence so we can do the right thing. Do we rebuild the road or do we upgrade the road? And to which road, A or B? And when? At the right time. So it's critical that the staff have the resources, including training and support, to gather this information. Council sets the direction and allocates the resources. Staff manages the risks and maintains the expected levels of service. And it's more than preventing service failures. It's managing risks to public health and safety. Staff needs to be able to provide council with the solid, reliable information on the assets. Asset management is a team effort. You need to work together. So actions you can take right now, if you haven't started, develop a policy, explore some different asset management practices, engage the staff. Where are you at in your data gathering? What are the risks you see? Are we providing adequate levels of service? Quite often the frontline staff know better because they're hearing the complaints, they're seeing what the roads, what the infrastructure is like. And you have to consider life cycle costing. It's not only maintenance and operations and preventative maintenance. You also have to look at what will it cost down the road. It would be great if you have the money to build a brand new recreation center, but you have to remember in several years, you're going to have to start replacing the roof, the flooring, things in the bathroom. So with asset management planning, there's lots of training all across Canada that's available. And you have to determine what's right for your size of municipality. And there's many examples across Canada. Ultimately, your goal should be to ensure the residents receive the sustained, cost-effective services they expect. And what steps can you, as a municipality, council, staff, public works, need to take to ensure that you can provide those sustainable services into the future? So I'm also a director with Asset Management Saskatchewan. Some of you may have seen me speak before. So Larry will be talking about Asset Management Sask. So there's website, email, and I just lost it. There we go. And there's other resources. Nicole will be talking about NAMS Canada shortly, but there's also a lot of information on Asset Management BC. The Alberta government has lots of excellent tools as well. Institute of Asset Management, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and CNAM. Questions? I'm not sure if we're doing questions now or at the end.
I think, Joanne, the plan was to leave them all until the end. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and Dustin will collect them throughout and moderate them at the end.
Thanks,
so
Nicole.
Yes, thanks, Joanne. And Adam, if you don't mind switching it over to my presentation. So I guess first what I want to say is I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me. As Dustin and Adam alluded to, my name is Nicole Allen. I am the Executive Director of NAMS Canada. I think I always want to start with who is NAMS Canada because there's a bit of confusion. We are a not-for-profit. Really, our mandate is to provide international best-in-class training, but bespoke for Canadian municipalities. So we've done a lot of work in training through the MAMP program and even prior to that as well. Yeah, Adam, I still don't see the presentation. Thank you. So we focus on a few pillars, and that's training, tools, and mentoring. So our role is to support infrastructure stewards, which is all of you and your staff, at any point in your journey in managing assets or providing services, I suppose. Okay, so without knowing where everybody is at on their journey, Joanne did an excellent job of outlining sort of their path for the arm of Manitoulin Lake. So I'm going to make sure that everybody here has the same idea, is thinking of the same thing when I throw out an asset management term or concept. So I'm going to almost back it up a bit and talk about why and why should you as an elected official care about asset management. So at a really high level, municipalities have massive investments in infrastructure. Think of all of the services that you provide, all of the infrastructure that you manage. We don't do that just for the fun of it. We do that because it provides really critical services to our communities, to our municipalities. This idea of infrastructure stewardship or managing our assets is an important responsibility. And I think what we're seeing over time is the expectations for stewardship is actually increasing. So it's expected that we can be accountable and transparent in how we make decisions and in the information that we provide to the public as well. Asset management plays a role in that because it helps us sort of, in some ways, predict or forecast the future. So how do we plan for the uncertainty of the future? Well, it gives us some tools to at least make a best case guess and to direct the organization where we want it to go. It also provides us with some basis of credibility so that it is understood what these forecasts or these decisions are being based on, which is actually all becoming more and more important all the time. I think asset management at its root comes down to some very, very simple and fundamental questions. One of those being, do we, and when I say this, I actually mean you, so think about your municipality. Do you have enough funding to operate, renew, maintain, acquire new assets, dispose of assets in a way that allows you to continue to provide the services you currently do into the future, so into the foreseeable future? Think about your municipality and think about if you can answer that with confidence. Remember your answer. I'm going to come back and actually do it as a poll because I'd like to speak a little bit more to that. But that's a really fundamental question. And what we often found when we asked people that in the early days of asset management was, yeah, I don't think we have enough, but I'm not super confident and I can't in a really clear way communicate that. Because the reality is, if we don't have enough funding to do the things that we want to do to provide those services, it must be posing a risk to our organization going forward. I guess the question as an elected official is, are your staff members communicating to you in a credible and transparent way the information you need to make informed decisions? And I'm going to keep coming back to that. That's a very fundamental aspect of asset management is, can you make informed decisions? Do you have enough information? Do you actually understand the consequences of the different decisions that could be made? Because ultimately, who chooses the best value plan? Who decides where that organization is headed? Well, it's you, the elected officials. We need to make sure that those decisions are fully informed and have the full knowledge of the consequences. So that's a really high level goal. That's going to launch us into our first poll. So does your organization have enough funds? That question I asked before. Do you have enough funds to continue to provide the current services that you do right now over the longer term? So 3 answers. Adam, if you can launch that poll. Yes, I'm confident we have enough funding. I actually don't really know. Or third response is no, I am confident we do not have enough funding. Oh, I'm not seeing the results yet for the poll.
Hi, Nicole. Sorry, they can just answer that in the chat.
Oh, in the chat. Okay, so, if you don't mind in the chat, just say, yes, we have enough, not sure, no, we don't. Really quick, what's your gut feel? If you want to earn extra gold points, you can say that your confidence level in it as well. So some A's, some B's, some C's. Yeah, a bit of a mix. So, and that will be representative of where you're at in the journey, the staff that you have working for you, expectations, all of those sorts of things. Because I've asked hundreds or thousands of municipalities this question over the last 15 years that I've done asset management training. The vast majority will say, no, we don't think we actually have enough funding to continue to provide services. We have a lot of infrastructure reaching the end of its useful life, and right now don't really have a plan in place to fund that renewal. Some say yes, they might have other sources of revenue and potentially other things blocking their ability to provide services like staff, other resources. But I guess the next step is, if you don't have this information being fed to you in a confident way, does that pose a risk? If you don't have enough funding, does that pose a risk? And if there are risks in this whole discussion, are we able to really clearly communicate that to the public, to other levels of government, to other organizations? So a lot of this comes down to communication and our ability to really credibly tell our story. So do we have enough money or not? What's going to happen as a result of that? Okay, so thanks everybody for your feedback. Hi, Denny, I recognize you from some of the ProCert courses, so some confidence there. The whole purpose of this image is really just to say, there's a much bigger discussion that is part of asset management that we have to consider. So these are things that we'll need to coordinate going forward. Levels of service, risk, community planning, long-term financial plans, financial reporting, climate change adaptation. As I get into the more advanced part of this discussion later on, these become very important, and the idea of building consistency into everything that we do as a municipality becomes much more important. Okay, so most people will agree informed decision-making is good decision-making, asset management is good management. What does that mean in Canada? Well, it's meaning a lot of different things, but what we are seeing is that most provinces have taken some sort of carrot or stick approach to incentivizing or requiring asset management. So linking it to gas tax in some way, linking it to federal funding through FCM. And that might be progress in asset management, or that might be a defined step in asset management. In Ontario, there's been legislation requiring asset management plans. In BC, we're seeing requirements for long-term financial planning based on asset management plans. So a whole wide range of requirements or incentives. But what we are seeing across the last 5-10 years is a massive step up in expectation and the maturity of asset management discussion. So it's here, it's being standardized, it's going to stay. I guess that's the only thing I want to take away from that. Okay, that's a bit about why we should care about asset management, but what do I actually mean with some of these terms? I'm not sure if when Joanne was sharing her story, if all of those terms like levels of service and risk really resonate or make sense. I'm going to make sure that you know how we use those terms in an asset management discussion. Okay, so the goal of asset management is simple. It's about providing services for people or organizations, and it's about effectively communicating that information so it leads to better and more informed decisions. Trying to do so in the most cost-effective way. Whenever I talk about asset management, I like to, and sometimes this pyramid or this triangle in there is actually a stool. So I like to think of it as a three-legged stool with 3 different legs: life cycle costs, performance or the service levels, and the risk. And if we change any one of those, we impact the other. So any discussion about asset management cannot just talk about what is it cost or what's the service level or what's the risk, because we are only looking at one tiny part of that discussion. We need to combine all 3 together. We saw in early asset management plans really a focus on what does it cost, which is important, and I can see why there's an interest in that. But without the discussion on service levels or risk, it actually doesn't mean anything. An example of why I say that is consider a municipality. It can be urban, it can be rural, that has a road network that has some paved road surfaces. If the discussion comes up, we don't have enough funding to actually maintain that service into the long term. Somebody, let's say it's me, I'll be the bad guy in this situation, can say no problem, revert all the roads to gravel, instantly decrease the life cycle costs. I know everybody's groaning because that is just one part of the discussion. There would be serious implications to service levels being provided, to expectations of customers, to the risks associated with that service that we're providing. So you can see we cannot talk about cost in isolation of the service and the risk as well. Level of service is a very critical and sometimes a little bit hard to grasp concept in asset management. So I always use a silly example, and I apologize to people who've heard me speak before because they've probably seen this. Let's talk about levels of service of my life. And this was a while ago. I think it was about 10 years ago, and I was moving out of Saskatoon. And at that point, if someone had asked, what services did I expect for my life? I could really quickly off the cuff say something like, nice big house. If I'm going to live in the city, I would need a car to get around. Wouldn't want to be in the city on the weekend, so how about the lake house? And I don't want to be bored at the lake, so how about a boat? And that is a very, very like 5-star service for my life that has no basis in what I'm able to afford or what I'm willing to pay for those services, because the reality at that same point in time was we were renting a townhouse, we had a used vehicle, that fancy lake house was a tent, and if we were lucky, we could borrow a kayak. And you know what? That was affordable, and I was actually pretty happy and fine to accept those as my levels of service at that point in time. The mistake that we make is when we talk about infrastructure or we talk about asset management planning, sometimes we talk about that previous slide with this perfect world with no basis in reality or actual expectations of customers. So we need to make sure that as a starting point, we talk about what are we currently providing and what does it cost? And that does not need to be the end of the story, because for me, you know, we wanted to change some of those levels of service with time. We actually moved to Canmore, bought a townhouse there. That car eventually died. The tent got bigger as the family got bigger. We could still borrow the kayak on the weekend. But we can only have that informed discussion about options for different service levels once we know what do we currently provide and what does it cost? Is that affordable? Is that sustainable? Then let's talk about options. Let's never accidentally go down that path of perfect perfect world levels of service with no basis in what we actually do. Okay, so an asset management plan, then what's the purpose of all of this? An asset management plan will talk about what you're trying to achieve as an organization. What's your goal? It'll talk about the consequences of the budget, and it will, or it should, support informed decision making. And I will say that the most important part of the asset management plan is actually talking about what are the consequences of the budget. And for you as elected officials, as you're approving budgets and going through that process, this is the information that you really need to make informed decisions. This looks very technical, but stay with me for a second because it's just to support that discussion. This is a very typical graph that would come from an asset management plan. The bars, there are a bunch of different colors showing different things that we might do. Let's assume, again, it's a road network to operate. Like for a road, let's say it's things like snow clearing and resurfacing and maybe filling some potholes. All of the things that we think we need to do, what would it cost? But the black line is the budget. The reality is where we say we want to do more work than we actually have budget to do it, some things aren't going to happen. We cannot do more work than we have funding to do. So stuff gets pushed. And that's the reality of working or managing infrastructure in a municipality. You will likely be deferring some stuff. And that's not the issue. The issue is, as elected officials, as decision makers, is staff able to tell you what are the actual consequences of us not doing those things we said we needed to do? So we pushed a bunch of projects. One, what projects are they? What's the impacts to levels of service? What's the impacts to risk and us as an organization? Again, that is the really important information often coming out of an asset management plan. What are the things we cannot do based on the current budget that's approved, and what are the consequences of that? Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is the idea of integrating asset management. So this is called a number of things in Canada right now. It's getting quite popular. It's really the idea of integrating or operationalizing asset management, but how do you make this part of everyday business and decision making? So lots of organizations across Canada are doing really good work in asset management, and sometimes it's actually not informing decisions as much as it should because of that break in communication. So we would say we want to get to the point where asset management is actually really making a difference in the decisions that are being made. That would be integrated asset management. And another way to look at that, and just consider, again, your municipality for a minute, is think about all the things that you do to plan for the future. You do official community plans, you do financial planning or reporting, you do, let's see, maybe climate adaptation is a new thing, or risk, or master plans, or strategies, or policies. The question for you is, are these plans having common objectives? Are they based on consistent, same foundational information? Are they pointing us in the same direction? Or do we have a bunch of plans done in isolation that are sort of showing different directions that make it really hard for the staff and for the elected officials to say, here's where we're heading, and here's the financial plan for that. It's sustainable or it's not, or we need to look at different income sources, or we need to look at different levels of service. There's been so many times when I've seen a municipality have an official community plan saying, we are going to have the best transportation network in the area, that is going to be our thing. And yet in the asset plan or in the financial plan, there's no investment into transportation, as if we can kind of will it into being. But again, it's this lack of consistency or integration between all the things that we're trying to do. I think this lack of consistency is where often plans and a lot of good work gets almost lost, or it falls over, or it isn't actually implemented. And for you as decision makers, it can often cause confusion. So if you're trying to make decisions and there's not consistency in the direction, it can be really hard to do that in an informed way. And I'm going to just, I guess, reiterate this example with something that I've heard all too often, and maybe it will ring a bell for you. And sometimes it shows either weaknesses in our asset management planning, or it shows weaknesses in how we financially report or we implement accrual accounting. But it's sitting there, let's say we're at the council table and we have a financial report being presented saying that the financial statement shows that we are in a surplus or a balanced financial position. We are sustainable into the longer term. At the same time, the people, the operational staff managing the infrastructure are going like, whoa, 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 red flag. We don't have as much money as we need to provide these services. Things are deteriorating. Things are going to get worse. The issue with that is it leaves you as elected officials, the decision makers, in a really difficult position of saying, who do we believe? How do we interpret between the lines to know what the actual story is? Asset management gives us the information to support informed decisions. It allows us to start integrating between plans so that we have a consistent path forward. We cannot do a lot of other planning in a really informed way until we have asset plans, because those asset plans allow us to draw the line in the sand and say, here's what we provide today for a service, here's the risks associated with it, and here's what it costs. And that either is or is not sustainable right now into the longer term. And if not, we need to start looking at other options. We can look at different alternatives for the level of service being provided. We can consider the services that we actually do provide, and if that's appropriate, we can look at other sources of funding as well. Asset management really becomes the foundation of this discussion and allows us to really make informed decisions going forward. So I think I have one last poll, right, and I'm almost done, is do you or does your organization, because you might not be the one, and you're likely not the one tasked with writing it, but does your organization have an asset management plan? So 3 options again, the first option being yes, but it's not linked to levels of service or risk and life cycle costs. So maybe it's just sort of a first cut and we have a ways to go. Yes, we have asset management plans and they have good definitions of levels of service and risk. And no, not at all, not really there yet. Oh, awesome. I mean, even this discussion in Saskatchewan, like I'm seeing the maturity change with time. So it's good to see that, well, it's dropping. So maybe it was just the early responders, but it's good to see that people are starting to have asset management plans. And it's totally understandable that a lot of people aren't there yet. I guess what I want people to take away from this discussion is I know that capacity is a massive issue, but I also will say asset management isn't going anywhere. We're seeing it being more and more strongly embedded into funding frameworks across the country. And I don't know specifically for Saskatchewan, I won't speak to that right now, but this is something that we need to be aware of, also just from a good stewardship perspective. So for you as elected officials, I think it is appropriate to start asking for this information so that you also are showing transparency and accountability in how you make decisions, because you're actually receiving the information that you need for them to be informed. Okay, that's it for me. Like Joanne, I'm going to wait and please feel free to ask questions in the chat, but we'll get to them at the end. It looks like right now we will have plenty of time for questions. So if you don't have questions, try to come up with some good ones while Larry does his piece. So thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, Nicole. It's good to see the pictures again. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Larry. I'm from Asset Management Saskatchewan. I've been with the organization since the get-go in 2017, and our creation coincided with the beginning of the Municipal Asset Management Program, or MAMP, which you've heard lots of people referring to. We exist to provide training and advocacy in asset management, and all the efforts that we make and the training and advocacy that we've provided to date has been made possible through the generous support of the Municipal Asset Management Program, which is funded by the Government of Canada and delivered by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Our projects, MAMP 1, 2, 3, and 4, so we're getting pretty deep into this now, have all been done in conjunction with our partners, SUMA, SARM, UMIS, and the RMAA. So those are organizations you know and trust and are likely members of. We've taken that support and that reach, I suppose, to try to combine a number of different things. And Nicole and I have worked together on this from the get-go, because Asset Management Saskatchewan has taken the concepts of the globally recognized asset management processes of NAMS Canada, and we've created a training continuum that was specifically designed to assist Saskatchewan municipalities to get going at this. And we've tried, and I think that we've been successful as well in keeping it simple. You know, we want to deliver not everything there is to know, but everything that you need to know. And my dad always calls that the 80-20 rule. So, we hope that we've succeeded at that. But the one thing we know for sure is that while it's simple, it's not easy to do, and that there's no real way to get around the fact that it's work and it takes time. Adam, I don't seem to have control of the slides. Maybe you could
You just have to
advance
click
or
take
just
control
pass
at the
that
top
to
there.
me. Maybe you could just advance the slide for me. I don't see we go there. Perfect. Okay, so this is our training continuum. We've got 3 courses, and the last of them is the course that we do with Nicole and NAMS Canada. But before we get there, we think that it's really important to get everybody on the same page with the fundamentals, the context, the who, what, where, why, and when of asset management. So we created the learning path to asset management readiness. It's an awareness building course. It's suitable for everybody, municipal staff, elected officials, and gosh, it would even be excellent to get some of your ratepayers or citizens to take it so they knew a little bit more about what you were talking about. But we'd be happy if we could just get elected officials and municipal staff on the same page, and we think this is a great way to do it. That course takes about 8 hours if you do a deep dive on it. It can be done much faster if you don't do the exercise or follow out to some of the resources we link to, but it really is a guided journey intended to get you going, get your team on the same page, and to just really understand where you're trying to get to and why. It covers all of the things that Nicole talked about briefly in a more in-depth, but still pretty high-level way. From there, we go into our second course, which is the Asset Register and the Initial State of the Infrastructure Report. That's a big mouthful, we know. We call it the SOTIR. This one's about data, and it's about getting your data, your asset register together, understanding the terminology, and basically the starting point for getting your data to begin telling you something. I've started to think about this as a prep course in some ways for our NAMS Plus Asset Management Training Workshop, because the two are very interrelated. And by the time we get to the NAMS Plus Training Workshop, you're doing a deeper dive on the things you've learned in the learning path. You're using the data and information that you've put together and cleaned up and got telling a story in the SOTIR. And then you're actually into the planning and the levels of service and risk conversations that Nicole touched on. And we like to think, and certainly there are plenty of cases where this has proven to be true, that this is enough information for you to get your municipality off the block and moving in that sort of continuous improvement sort of space. That improvement plan is a big piece of this. Alan Mapstone always said, "Don't let perfection get in the way of excellence," I think was his quote. Maybe Nicole, you could help me with that in the Q&A. But the idea is to just get started, and knowing where you're going is why we developed this continuum. Adam, if you could, I now have the controls, excuse me. Okay, so, we've heard Joanne say this, and Nicole said it too. We know that time is the limiting factor, really. And originally we thought that there might be some budget considerations associated with the constraints as to why people are struggling to get started and where they are. But we wanted to make our training very affordable. And by very affordable, we're talking about free if your population is 250 or less. So we have a bundle that includes the Learning Path Asset Management Readiness and the SOTIR. That's free to all municipalities under 250 population. It includes unlimited seats for as many people in that municipality that can take the training. And that same bundle is $250 for any municipality with 250 population or more. And we've done what we can to make this accessible from a financial perspective, but there's no getting around the fact that it takes some time. So not everybody's interested in the bundle. So also available, all the courses are available individually. We've got a council engagement strategy, which is designed for administrators basically to provide agenda information and a little bit of background for a council conversation about how to begin making asset management a priority. We've got the 2 bundles listed already. And then the learning path, the SOTIR, and the NAMS Plus workshops are all available a la carte as well. So just while I'm on the topic, and of course it's short notice and it's probably too late in the game for anybody to take advantage of this. But we also do it again in the spring of 2023 and the fall of 2023. But our NAMS Plus workshop begins next week. It's 6 online sessions every Tuesday from October 25th until the end of November. The sessions are recorded so that you can continue to go back to those for up to 30 days following the end of the course. And as I said, it's sort of the place where we're trying to get learners to be. So the learning path, we say, is the best first step, although none of these are a prerequisite of the others. So if you wanted to start here, or your council or staff was ready to take a step towards asset management planning, this would be a good one. Our course begins next week. So in wrapping, I want to leave time for the questions, and I would really encourage you to take advantage of both Nicole and Joanne. Their depth and experience in this is incredible, and they're very passionate and interested to talk about it. But I want to thank SARM for hosting this webinar, and for you for your time and interest to being there. And just leave here that, you know, if you're a municipality in Saskatchewan and you need help to make asset management a priority, or you're already committed to asset management, but your team could use a boost, or, and I know you're out there, so I'm talking to you. If you're already a convert, you're a believer, a champion, a change maker, we could really use your help to make asset management a priority in Saskatchewan. So if you're any of those things, please get in touch with us. Our web address, our email, our phone number, there's lots of ways to get a hold of us, and we're always happy to talk about it. So that's it for me. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to the questions and discussions to follow.
Well, this is great. Thank you, Larry. I believe what we're going to do is move into the Q&A session now. And so if you've got questions, I'll encourage you to put them in the chat, and then I will read them from the Q&A section as they come up. So I'm just opening that part on my screen right now, and as soon as they appear, I'll be able to start bringing the questions along.
Dustin, just so you know, I don't have the chat feature, so if there's anything that's directed at me, just let me know.
You bet, Larry. That's great.
Thank you.
There we go. So the first question here is, has anyone implemented a CMMS software in their municipality? This particular question asker is asking because they're looking for one that is a good option for their size. Anybody familiar with that CMMS, Nicole, there?
Sorry, unmute myself. I don't know specifically, and I'll give other people a chance to hop in there because it is quite specific. I am a huge proponent of I guess tools and systems that can support you in what you're trying to do. And I say this more from an asset management perspective. If we invest in tools or software too early, they are often implemented in a way that actually doesn't help us achieve what we're trying to get. And they often consume a budget that we don't have access to, again, for a number of years. So what, I guess the examples that I'm thinking of is many municipalities that have kind of rushed into software, and it was implemented based on sort of what they thought they would need, and it didn't end up giving them the answers, and it was so expensive to re-implement that they actually almost walk away from it for up to 10 years, because they are significant investments from a time and from a money perspective. So don't know specifics on this. I see there's an answer or two maybe, but just anytime you're investing, make sure that you have enough maturity in that topic to know what it is that you're going to need and how you're going to use it so that it really makes your life as easy as possible.
That's great, Nicole. Thank you. Maybe we'll go on to the next one, and if subsequent reflection brings in additional thoughts, we can include that in the response after the webinar. The next question is, seeing as the MAMP funding has been depleted, is there likely to be additional grant incentives in the future? I wonder which of our prestigious experts would have thoughts on that.
I'll start, or maybe
Yeah.
Joanne, do you want to go?
So right now, I've been to some FCM meetings as a representative at Asset Management Saskatchewan. So they are on, the funding is run out, and there's been no indication, yes or no, that there will be future funding. It's totally up in the air right now, which is unfortunate. We're really hoping there will be. I hope the federal government sees the benefit of it and continues it, but that's way above my pay grade to make that decision.
I would say that the MAP funding from a training capacity building perspective is ongoing until November of 2023. So there is plenty of time to access the training side of it, because that, well, has been committed. A lot of those courses haven't started yet. So there is that opportunity. From a municipal perspective, I think that there's agreement that MAP as a program as it exists now will not exist in the future. There might be something that sort of replaces it. We are seeing a lot of interest at the federal level of climate change adaptation playing a stronger role. That's all we know. FCM is staying very close-lipped, but potentially hearing some stuff in the next couple of months.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing what you can on that. Next question here. I think I know the answer to this one myself, actually. Are you guys open to discussions outside of this session? And I assume that's actually the case.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
And probably to Asset Management Saskatchewan would be the best place to start. I don't know, Joanne, who the contact person, if we want to put it in the chat, or you had it up on your slides as well.
It's info@assetmanagementsk.ca.
Perfect. With that, we'll go to the next one. Are there templates available for an asset registry for a town under 1,000 residents?
You know, that might be a good question for somebody from SARM, because that used to exist. That was developed, like I was in Saskatchewan working on the implementation of PSAB 3150 in 2007. And at the time, Municipal Affairs, SUMA and SARM, RMAA, UMass all banded together and supported a project to develop an asset register to be used for PSAB 3150, but also that could be used for asset management. So it did exist. I don't know if that's still available. It would be a great starting spot. I would also say, if you do, like Larry talked about the SOTIR part of that project, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne or Larry, but I believe that you would be using a template for an asset register, and it would be the same one that we would use for any NAMS training as well, or a very similar one. So
Yeah.
those definitely do exist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. The SOTIR course, it goes beyond here's a template. It's here's a template and here's how to use it, and here's the terminology and all of the different components and considerations of it. So that course is available, and I think anybody that got through that would certainly find it to be a useful experience. And then that data, once it's been populated into that template, can carry on with you down your asset management journey and into the NAMS Plus workshop or tools. So they've been designed to work together or independent of each other.
And with regard to the SARM template, I'm happy to field questions about that. So if someone would like to reach out, I'll be more than happy to ask my colleagues here at SARM if there's such a template available, and we'll make sure that we pass it along. So next question. This one says, we're already managing our assets. How is this different?
That's a great question. And I think one of the key things we look at with asset management is you're probably doing the majority of this, and no one's saying, and probably doing a very good job. I think that's the reality. And it's so silly that we basically took managing assets, and I wish we had a different name. Formalized asset management is about doing it in a transparent way that can be effectively communicated. So a lot of times, as people are doing the best that they can to manage assets, it's actually not necessarily informing decisions as much as it should. It's not helping us determine that long-term sustainability if we generate enough income to provide the services that we do. So it's definitely feels like a nuance, but it's that formalization of what we're doing and understanding if it's affordable and sustainable, and then kind of steering the future course based on the outcome of that discussion.
That's great. I'm seeing other heads nod. So Joanne and Larry are in full agreement. So that's okay. I don't see any additional questions just yet, but I'll encourage the audience that, oh, there's one now. See, all I had to do is say I'll encourage the audience, and there we go. This question reads, we already have an asset management plan from a consultant. We don't have to do any more work. Why should we take classes or training?
Can I jump on that one?
Yeah, go, Joanne. Please do. I get so excited about asset management, I can't stop talking. Go, Joanne.
Yeah, so like I said in my presentation, we did hire a consultant. And we did that at a time when it was still pretty new. We were learning and everything. And it really helped us gain a better understanding of what's in the asset management plan and how to use it. And that's key. You have to understand the information in the plan, how to leverage that information to help make your decisions for the future, and how to help justify those decisions to your ratepayers and citizens.
There's a follow-up question for you, Joanne, that popped in, but I want to add one thing to that, because I used to be a consultant, and I think that there is a place and a time for consulting. I work for a not-for-profit now. I would just say, in my years of consulting, what I would often come across is sort of being the second consultant into an organization where they'd had a really bad, I guess, experience. So I'm thinking of a city that I worked with not far from where I live now, and they had outsourced asset management plans for transportation network. And a lot of technical stuff was done, and it was presented at the council meeting, and it said, like, here's the plan. You need to spend this many millions of dollars in the next year. That's sort of the gap in the infrastructure. And the council went, and one guy apparently stood up and looked out the window and went, I drive on these roads every day. It's not that bad. I don't believe this. And they basically discredited asset management to the point the council didn't want to hear it for like 7 years. It took them to get back at that council table in a meaningful way. So it's sort of I always have the same response to both software and outsourcing work. Capacity is a huge issue, and you may need to outsource work, but it's having enough maturity in the organization to know what you're asking for and looking for from that consultant, so you get something that actually helps you make better decisions. And it's not a report that just instantly goes on the shelf. It's a tick box, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't help you make better decisions. So absolutely a place for it. Just be careful that you know enough. And I think that's where training comes in, to have enough maturity to actually know what you need from them, to ask the right questions from them.
Yeah, and I agree. And for the price of $250, take some of the training. It'll help you better leverage that information that's in your asset management plan. And yeah, like Nicole, I have heard of situations where someone has been hired and all the community got was a glorified asset register.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it and going, we spent money on this. Yeah. So that's why you need to have the training, so you understand the terminology, what you're looking for, what you need.
Really helpful, Joanne. Before we jump to the next question, Larry, I think I saw you wanting to comment on this question as well about the necessity of training. Did you want to say anything there, or have your colleagues done it for you?
Just briefly. So I am also a consultant, but I'm a business consultant. And I've always thought of an asset management plan as a business plan for municipalities. So there's a connection to the other side of my life where I write business plans for businesses. And if they're not involved in the crafting and creation of those plans, they don't know what to do with it at the end. And if they're involved in the process and they're engaged, and there's a capacity building component to that, and you're left at the end of, not just understanding the plan, but why those decisions were made and you were part of them, then they can carry on with that plan. And, a quote that I like is that plans are useless, but planning is priceless. So, you know, everybody says, well, we don't want to make this plan because it's going to change right away. You'd be like, well, it is absolutely going to change. But if you were part of creating it, you are also able to change it to reflect the current needs, the changes in demand. And as soon as the community goes into a position of control and comfort, they are proactively managing assets instead of reactively managing crises. So that whole piece of, well, we got the plan, we don't need to do any more work, is like, yeah, the plan is actually the beginning, and there is no end, because so long as you're in the business of providing services, you're going to be in the business of managing assets that are required to do that, and onward you go.
That's great, Larry. We've got just 4 more minutes, so I'll go to the next question here. And this one's for Joanne specifically. Maybe it's asking you to disclose some trade secrets here, Joanne, but they're wanting to know, how has buy-in been with your staff, and how did you get them on board?
Well, my former Reeve, I said when I was working on the asset management plans, I said to him, I said, you know what, it would really help if you guys took the course. And I said this to my foreman as well. And I said, it would really help to have these discussions so you understand where I'm coming from and the information that I need. So he basically said I voluntold him to do it. So, but and unfortunately, he was democratically retired a couple years ago. So the foreman and I, him and I really work well together and have the good conversations. And so when we're sitting with council discussing the different roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, even equipment, we're able to have those conversations with them and say, well, okay, you're saying that we should do this, but this is what it'll cost us. Where are we going to get that money from? You know, we don't have, no municipality has an endless pot of money. And so having the conversations with council, with asking them questions really helps.
That's helpful. Not a bad strategy for other areas of life too, actually. But well done. So we're just down to 2 more minutes. If there were additional questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll follow up with them later. I think though, given where we're at, and I'm not seeing any more questions pop up, I will thank you, our presenters, so Nicole and Joanne and Larry. Thanks for taking time today. I appreciated seeing your passion actually in this. This is really neat, and it's pretty contagious, and I'm sure our audience would have felt so that way too. And thank you again for all the participants who joined this webinar and took some time out of your day to learn about asset management. Again, this will be posted on the SARM website, along with any additional material that is developed after the webinar itself. So with that, I think we can adjourn our time together. One more time, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Have a great day.
Folks.
Yep.